Well, good morning to you.
Good morning to you, Sincere.
Let's just recap real fast. So last week we covered some of those little intricate nuggets that makes people into great entrepreneurs years to come. So, even as I shared with you, even though, I was 3 years old and I'm jumping in the pool and I'm doing all kinds of crazy things in the corporate living that we had, I still, in the back of my mind, I guess they call it the subconscious mind, right? I was still programming and recording what was going on. So we've established that family, from parent or family member to family member, is one of the most key kind of nuggets of a way to turn a person from an ordinary entrepreneur into something extraordinary. The other thing that we covered was the mentorship type, the direct mentorship, where when you got to the Air Force Academy, you kind of felt, oh, wow, this is a great place. You were able to recognize people for what they were doing professionally, and you felt like, man, this is part of where I want to go in life, versus people that you were growing up with and going to school with. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Awesome. So one thing that we did not cover was your age. So I think we missed that part of the question. So the Digital Equipment Corporation opportunity, how old were you at that time?
I was 26.
Oh, okay. And if I remember correctly, in other conversations, we had talked about the fact that the term CFO was not necessarily created back then, that this was more of a controller position, but it could be equated to CFO if now was then. Is that correct?
When I first started at Digital, I was working for the person who you could call a CFO. Digital, I was Digital's first budget analyst. And my role was to have managers who are running businesses understand that even though they're growing and they're making great money, you have to have some type of controls. And so my role was to kind of follow these guys around and explain to them the benefit of having a budget, because none of these guys felt like, what for? I'm making money. The company's making money. And I'm trying to bring that structure to why you should do that. Also, bringing forecasting. I know in today's terms, it probably is laughable that a company would operate without having a forecast,
or
but
a budget.
But they didn't.
Right.
And they also didn't collaborate. The guy in manufacturing
let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's cover those 2 points. So you're saying, and this was 74, 73?
76 to 81.
Okay. So 76, you're working for a Digital Equipment Corporation and you're working directly with business owners.
Right.
Okay. So to a certain extent, you're working with startups, entrepreneurs, that sort of thing.
Right.
Right.
Absolutely.
So here we are in 76, and the term forecasting and budgeting didn't even exist.
Well, not at Digital for sure.
Right. Which to a certain extent would be today's Google, correct?
Well, I'm sure there are people who do that now, but not that.
No, I meant in terms of impact and technology.
Yes, absolutely.
At the time, they were at the head of the.
Yes, they were the head of the curve.
Okay. So what my point is, they would be considered almost a Google in terms of tech space and in terms of impact. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Correct.
So here you are, 26 years old, coming into basically getting a job at Google, an executive job at Google, and you're working directly with other tech savvy people, other technology companies, and you're convincing them, instead of, because we'll get into what they were actually doing and why you had to convince them, but let's just be clear. Here you are, let's say, with an entrepreneur spirit, you know, you've already kind of created your own, let's say, career path to a certain extent, instead of just listening to what you're hearing about people that you're growing up with or what you're hearing at school. Because of the exposure to the Air Force Academy, you're in a different mind frame already, to the point where after you finish college, you've got opportunities, and here it is, Google, looking for bright, shiny stars like yourself. As you said, you were the first budget analyst. So you're innovating pretty much what entrepreneurs were doing at that time back in 76. You were trying to convince them that, hey, you need to like map out your future. You need to figure out your spending. You need to figure out, you know, if you continue this particular trend of sales or whatever, you need to be able to forecast that month after month, year after year, quarter after quarter. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So what were they actually doing versus what you were suggesting?
They were basically just pulling together the product and shipping it. And sales folks were saying, hey, you're not making enough product. We got more sales than you're producing. And they were trying to catch up to what had already been sold.
Right.
So as far
instead of, let me make a better question. Instead of budgets, what were they doing?
They were just making it. Sales.
Pan your phone up a little bit.
Okay.
Okay. So instead of budgets, they were doing what? They weren't writing down sales. They weren't making ledgers of sales. They weren't having spreadsheets of sales.
The sales guy would send them a PO, and they would fill it, and that's the way they would operate.
What was their way of tracking sales?
Oh, they would keep track of, on a purchase order, what they shipped out to Sincere.
Okay.
But they weren't looking at themselves as a business. They were going one at a time.
Okay. So by bringing in the budget, what were they actually budgeting for?
They would be budgeting for the fact that they have 16 Sinceres that they have to ship to this month, and how much product is that going, how much will that cost, what is the labor associated with that, instead of just going invoice by invoice.
Okay. So they were they could figure out their spending, they could figure out what it takes to sell this or that in terms of products. Now they have a structured system that they could kind of maybe even negotiate with shippers. Maybe this company versus this company is less expensive or more expensive. Is that where you're leading with that?
Yes, because the procurement process was in the same spot that finance was, which was that procurement was working to fill the orders, but not necessarily taking advantage of how many quantities they have to fill. You know, getting some good pricing.
Okay.
It was just,
so they weren't necessarily being competitive. They were just kind of doing business as usual, business as usual, business as usual. Is that correct?
Yes, as quickly as they could get it out the door. That's what they were doing.
Got it. And in terms of forecasting, what were they actually forecasting?
Well, they hadn't thought about the idea that what they're doing, there are, competitors, there are trends. They were just thinking about fulfilling orders. They weren't thinking about what's going to happen 6 months from now, what's going to happen a year from now. Do I need, a good example is from what I did, they decided to build a printed circuit board shop because now they knew that the quantities were too great for them, even if they did 3 shifts, to be able to fulfill those orders. They needed a new facility. So
Got it. I mean, this sounds so similar to what your average business owner even still does to this day, especially small business owners. To a certain extent, they don't budget. To a certain extent, they don't actually price compare, right? They kind of just get into a business as usual, and no one's really out there, let's say, forecasting, saying, hey, let's go ahead and use this company versus this company because of shipping, because of sales, because of price. Is that correct? Is that what you're leading
That,
to?
yes, absolutely.
Okay, so you were one of the first, because like you said, you're working for Google, basically the equivalent of Google back then, which is Digital Equipment Corporation, and you were their first budget analyst.
Yeah.
Right. So you were pretty much teaching Google, which then taught a bunch of all these other entrepreneurs and startup companies how to budget, how to forecast, and the importance of both.
Right.
How would you summarize that, let's say, for today's entrepreneurs? Like what should they be doing if they're not, I think to a certain extent we may have convinced them that a budget is smart and forecasting is smart, but trying to bring that into today's kind of atmosphere where you're kind of living sale to sale, right? Or opportunity to opportunity, what kind of tools have you or can you share with some of the up and coming now that can help with budgeting and forecasting?
What I can say, and I do apologize, but what I can say now is that there are plenty of platforms where one can just simply go and see what is the trend for the product that you are producing. You can also, there are procurement platforms that will allow you to say, hey, I need 2,000 units of X next month. And they can give you a sense of what the pricing might be for those. So today's entrepreneur has so many tools available to help them be able to plan better. But the key here is to decide that you really need to have planning. You really need to get beyond what's happening today. So that's where delegation is important. You know, when you get to a certain point, you have to have the people who work for you be able to take over their jobs while you maintain a big picture view. What is your vision? What were you planning on seeing happen 90 days from now, 6 months from now? Because that is where your future lies. You've got the business up and running. Now you just have to make sure that there is a place in your mind as to where it is, so you can give direction. So you can say, okay, we can do this or we can't do this. Because it's real easy to get lost, because I've worked with a lot of entrepreneurs who do go purchase order by purchase order, and they find themselves with what we call the ups and downs of their business. It's great when the purchase orders are coming in, and it really doesn't feel good when they slow down. And you've got to have that vision for what's coming next, what's out there, because always looking forward. You were looking forward when you establish your business. You need to continue to be the person who looks forward to keep your business sustained.
That was a lot. That was a lot. That was a lot. And it was coming from your CEO mindset. Myself as a salesperson, you know, first and foremost, I'm the heart of a salesperson, right? And then comes in marketing and advertising. You're talking big picture, right? As a sales guy that drives sales and revenue and profits, we work in day to day. We are PO to PO. And what happens, especially nowadays, some of the best entrepreneurs I know are the best salespeople. So to a certain extent, it's very hard if you start a company as a salesperson to even think like a CEO, because you're always thinking about what it took to make that sale to a certain extent if you get to a certain level, especially as an entrepreneur. So how, as a salesperson like myself, in terms of what you're talking about, big vision, 6 months, this and that, for the most part, we do get caught sale to sale, PO to PO. When you use a term like procurement, when you use these bigger CEO terms, see if you could take a second to maybe break that down and give us something tangible that we might be able to learn from.
Okay.
Because you talk about
Let's say,
procurement, you talk about delegation, but most of us
yes.
run this business, you know, to a certain extent by ourselves, and then we outsource whatever we need in terms
Okay.
of skills and stuff like that. So the entrepreneur now basically is a professional that just hires other professionals, and most of that is 1099 or freelance. Not a lot of it is staff. A lot of it is, again, consultants, freelancing, and that sort of thing. So when you talk about delegation, let's just deal with the procurement, the budget piece, and the forecast piece. Give us
Okay.
something tangible that the average person, just like myself, who's PO to PO, sale to sale, can say, you know
Okay.
what? Give us one tip out of that we could say, man, I can implement that today.
Okay. Take the time to see how many units that you sold last month. How much did you pay for each unit?
I think I got that part. Today's entrepreneur is a lot more social, a lot more online, a lot more of a personality influencer type. So they don't necessarily have units to sell. Some do, but a lot of like what I sell is pretty much influence. So it's hard to, let's say, equate that, but I wanted something that was a little bit more universal, that wasn't a person or a company that sells widgets, but someone that has sales just like anything else and wants to get to that next level. Just one little piece.
You have to decide what is that next level.
Okay, go there.
If you know, there's this old saying that says that without a destination, you'll never arrive.
Give
And
me that in business terms.
Okay. If you're an influencer and you've influenced 6 people last month, you need to decide, where did these 6 people come from, so that you can replicate 6 more people next month.
Learn your formula. Understand how it is that you were able to be successful or get those sales or get that influence.
Right. Talking to the people who became your clients, and basically not asking them directly, but sort of, why did you choose me? What made you different?
Sort of surveying them.
Right. Why did you choose me? Because that's the formula you want to replicate again and again and again, because that's where your success is.
And we'll end that there. I'll summarize it, but we'll end that there. So for the guys that are selling widgets, make sure you understand the cost per unit. And in that cost is, what was the advertisement? What was the staff costs? What was it to produce it? What was it to ship it? You know, and per unit, if you can get to that point. And then for your influencers, what makes me an influencer? The people that I talk to, why have they retained my services? And then just replicate that as much as possible. Is that a good way to summarize that up?
Yeah, that was.
Well, thank you for your time. It's part 2. Little technical difficulties. Hopefully they'll understand that. You know, you are my mother and much older and just learning these things. So hopefully
Thank you so much.
Too much.
Okay. Thanks a lot.
Take care.
Bye-bye. Thank you, everyone, for watching.